Hello, 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 and good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Nick, your favorite personal growth coach, and I am excited to be with you another evening, another Wednesday, to talk about adulting in my purpose. We have been doing it, guys. Can you believe this is our 10th session? Something that kind of evolved from the pandemic and being social distancing and the state of quarantine. I started doing these lives and it kind of evolved into what I call is a movement. So we started at the beginning of April, and now we are on the 10th session of Adulting in My Purpose. And I'm so excited about what has come out of it and how God is using this platform and the impact that it is having on viewers and people that participate, and especially our millennials. As you may know, or if you don't, if you're tuning in for the first time and seeing me, my name is Dr. Nicole Rankin. I'm the CEO of the Cole Academy of Personal Growth. We are a professional development company that provides leadership development, personal growth, and communication training to students, as well as the leaders and parents that support them. So doing this session on Adulting in My Purpose resulted out of the publication of a journal that I wrote and released earlier this year in February. And the particulars of the journal is that it is about self-discovery. It's about personal growth and personal development. And the focus of that journal was is for our millennials, our 20s and 30s, our college students, our young adults, young professionals, those that are in life trying to figure it out, maybe stuck, maybe needing guidance, and just needing to truly discover not only who they are, but whose they are. The journal takes you on 7 journeys of self-discovery, and it has been an amazing opportunity to see the growth and development of the millennials that have taken a part of this journey with me. I've been taking groups of millennials. We just wrapped up our 4th cohort that went through the book, and that was amazing. Let me tell you, we have some amazing young people on this earth that are full of potential, full of passion, and truly, truly want to make a difference in the world and in the lives of others. So I am just excited to see what God is doing. So today we have been talking about personal development since we kind of started, and different aspects of personal development. So before I want to get into that, I want to make sure I do my due diligence in all my technology, and let me know who's out there. Say hello. Let me know. Let me do my sharing. I got to learn about all of this, y'all. Y'all help me. Do my sharing on my platforms. Share to start my watch party. So make sure you make sure you share on your pages as well. All right. So we have Ashley's there. Hey, Ashley. Hey, Alex. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Awesome. So today we're going to do a little shift. Like I said, we've been talking about, this is the 10th episode or 10th session of Adulting in My Purpose. And so we've been talking about personal development and growth and leadership throughout the whole other sessions, talking about adulting in my giftedness, adulting with clarity, and doing the things that you need to do to be successful. But in light of what we're going through right now, we know that we are experiencing a lot of crisis, coming out or in the middle of a global pandemic, and now going into the civic unrest that we see that's happening throughout our country. It's just a lot going on. So I wanted to take a pause out, because what I realized that one of the chapters in the journal is self-awareness. And when we talk about self-awareness with the group, the issues of race almost always comes up, because this idea is you're developing yourself and knowing yourself as a Black woman, as a Black man in this country, who you are, understanding who you are, loving yourself, loving the gifts, loving the talents, but then understanding how to be able to be fruitful and be successful in a land or in a country that may not have your best interest at heart. So we get in these conversations all the time when we talk about self-awareness. So I wanted to dive in and have a discussion on being a millennial in 2020 and how are we dealing with everything that's going on. So I invited some of my friends and I am going to have introduce them and bring them in so you can see them. We can have this, get the discussion started. First, I wanted to bring up Denisha Starling. Denisha Starling resides in Gwinnett County, Georgia. She has started her undergrad at Wesleyan College in Macon, where she earned a bachelor's in marketing and advertising and communication with a minor in economics. Then she also graduated with her master's degree from the University of Georgia in housing and consumer economics with a minor in gerontology. So she also earned another master's degree from Southern New Hampshire University. She is a vegan health and wellness coach. She's a licensed minister and also a minister of dance. So we want to welcome Denisha to the panel on this evening.
Hey.
Next, all right. Next, we have the good Reverend Cornelius Lloyd. And Cornelius is a native of Savannah, Georgia. He has a bachelor's degree in sociology with an emphasis in business and African American studies from Georgia State. He got his master's of divinity in 2010. And he is all things youth and mentoring. Currently, he is serving mentoring as a mentoring director for the Chapman County Excel Strategies, which is a mentoring network for young men from 15 to 25. He also trains young men in lifestyle curriculum, leads them and to help them with their trade and their vocation so they can gain full-time employment. He serves as a coordinator with also Step Up Savannah that provides resources to address the poverty in Savannah. So we welcome Reverend Cornelius to the show tonight. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we have Coach E. Spear. Hello, hello. Coach E is a graduate, HBCU graduate of the Jackson State University. So he emphasized Jackson State University. He's a native of Tampa, Florida, and he's an community advocate, a mentor, licensed minister, a coach, and he's the first generation in his family to accomplish amazing things. So we are so glad to have you on tonight as well. And last but not least, we have Candace St. John. Hello. Candace was born and raised in NYC, New York City. She is a registered nurse. She is also a spoken word artist named C. Saint. And her spoken word artist, her purpose is to bring life and light to a hurting world. She used her poetry to bring attention to some of the important issues that desperately need to be discussed in her own way. And she believes in finding and purpose in your pain and healing through transparency. And not only is she a registered nurse, but she is an author of not only one, not only two, but three books called Books of Tears. One is Dare My Soul to Sing, and an album of mixed message mixtape. So welcome everyone to the session on Adulting in My Purpose tonight. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Says, hey, Courtney from Savannah. You got some Savannah natives chiming in.
Man in the building.
All right, so we're going to get this discussion started. We know that we are in a rough time. We are in a time of hurt. We are in a time of pain. We are in a time of what we call crisis. So I want you just start the discussion, just letting us know a little bit more about yourself. And when you do that, I want you to define what racial equality and racism means to you.
Okay.
Who's gonna start?
I'm gonna say, I thought you're gonna have to call on somebody. Well, good evening to everyone. My name is Reverend Cornelius Lloyd. I hail from Savannah, Georgia, as Dr. Nick has already said, and I've been in social services in some form for about 20 plus years now. It's amazing you can be old enough to say that and still feel like you're young. Um, but and being under 40. And so I've come from Savannah. I spent a lot of my development in the Atlanta community as well. I mean, the early young adult years in youth ministry in nonprofit. And so it's amazing to me that I believe a lot of the things that sometimes I thought I could not accomplish, it's almost as if the Lord used that thing, that unique gift, to open the door for me. For those who do know me back when, I had a long head full of locks while I was in college in my early young adult life, and people that I grew up around thought it was a phase. That wasn't necessarily a phase; it was a part of my evolving maturity, and I ended up on the campus at Columbia Theological Seminary from my Master Divinity work, and it was there that I learned to some of my classmates, and most of them, predominantly white institution, began to share with me how they begin to see a new image of Jesus Christ in my representation. And so that was very interesting because I had long ago, because of the tutelage of my mother and father, discarded what we have seen as the typical white Jesus with blue eyes. And so a lot of times that has a lot of framework around how people either receive Christianity or reject or step away from Christianity because of the image. So for me, I saw race as sometimes doors close and other doors open. And I won't take all the time, but that's how I start out. And so a lot of my mentoring has been around young people looking within themselves to be empowered to be who God has called them to be.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm bored.
Who's next?
Um, like you said, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. New York City, everybody knows, is very diverse. It's a lot of people from all over the world up there. However, it is very segregated, and you would find most communities, like the Caribbean community or the Jewish community, they do stay to themselves. So, in terms of overt racism, I didn't really experience it until I moved down here. So I guess I knew what racism was, and I understood it, but it's not something I directly experienced. So I guess I was sheltered in a way. I didn't really have any white classmates, or I didn't know many white people at all personally, until I moved, except family members, but till I moved down here. And so it's like a whole new world, and it's not just the overt things, but I think more times than not, what you experience is those little subtle, insidious things, on your day to day, when you're going out to the grocery store or you're going to work and you feel like you have to work 3 times harder than your white counterparts, and they can complain and be overwhelmed, but you can't. And you have to show up and put on a smile. And even in light of what's happening now, it's like I don't watch TV too much, but I go on social media for relief just to get a break, and I'm seeing people who look like me being gunned down and strangled, but I still have to show up and put a smile on my face. And these are things that they have the privilege of ignoring, or they can't even relate to, things that wouldn't even cross their mind. But this is the life that we live.
Yes.
So, uh, I'm again Eric Spear, and I'm originally from Tampa, Florida. And along my journey, being from South Florida and the South, I think as a black man, first generation, everything. I think it was an interesting road for me, and I think I speak for those individuals that come from the impoverished background. And again, as I stated before, you know, the thing that brought me into being able to, I guess, what you would call a success story is being an athlete. And we come with two realities from my environment. Everything for me was, again, first generation Section 8 government housing, and that in itself is oppression. That's racism. We had less resources. We didn't have access to certain things under government housing and government assistance. We only had access to certain food. So I grew up under certain dietary oppression. That's oppression in itself when you have lack of nutrients, lack of vitamins and minerals. Our children are not being able to eat properly. The school system was a systematic issue because I had a single mother. I had a mother that didn't have opportunity to go to the PTA meetings. So as early on as elementary school, they tried to diagnose me with 3 or 4 different mental illnesses and indoctrinate me in the medication. And that is a consistent issue with our school, which I deem to be school, the prison pipeline. And that happens to a lot of us first generation, you know, uh, uh, students, and I didn't have the traditional family. So again, I'm from the South. I was a track athlete in high school, which allowed me, obtain a scholarship, Division 1. And that was something that allowed me to make it and facilitate my success. But when you're black and you're coming from the inner city and you might not be an athlete, you might not have access to coaching and resources, and even in that, just the school system in itself, it's a tough journey for us with the testing, standardized testing. So there's so many ways that we can approach racism. It's not just gunning us down in the streets, but it's those tests being set up in a way where it almost makes it impossible to get the scores that you need when you don't have the academic resources, and so that's something in itself. There's many facets of racism.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Um,
Tanisha?
I agree with Coach Eric. So I grew up. I'm actually a native of Georgia. A lot of people don't believe it. It's hard to find Georgia peaches in this world, but I actually grew up in Georgia. And for me, I think it was kind of I saw it, but then I heard about it growing up. So like I remember my grandmother, when I was smaller, having to still work at a white woman's house as her job during the summer, like she was her maid. She would clean her home. And so from a very early age, like my mom, my grandparents, they would tell me their stories of how they grew up in like rural Georgia and the things that they had to go through. And so it wasn't that it didn't register, but it was in my reality, I just didn't see it until I started to get, like Coach E said, in high school and further along in college, I went to predominantly PWI institutions. And so I don't have the experience as some of my family members who went to HBCUs. My experiences in high school, elementary and high school were predominantly black elementary school, predominantly black high school, and then I went to a very Wesleyan is an all-female college, but it's very diverse. However, it's considered a PWI, as is UGA. I did experience racism growing up when I would go visit some of my family members and what we consider the country in rural Georgia, like little white kids, like throwing rocks or just cursing you out, calling you the N-word. But it wasn't until I went to college and I left the city to go to rural town and I encountered racism on my own, where predominantly at Wesleyan, I would have rich older white women, especially in the community in Macon, when they would see like paraphernalia, if I was at the grocery store, even if I was on campus, they would ask me, well, why are you here? How did you get here? How are you paying for this? Like, do you even belong here? And UGA, Nick, Nicole and I go way back. She's been my mentor, my aunt, like for a long time. At UGA, I had professors tell me like I wouldn't make it just because of the color of my skin, or they would judge me because I didn't look the professional black type. In certain jobs, my first job out of college, I worked for an international marketing firm. And so there were some things that happened there. And I think someone, stated it earlier, racism isn't always overt. It can be very hidden with your friends or just the ignorance of what people don't know or what they choose to display. But systematically, it's very, it's just is out there. And I think all of us have, experienced it on some level or another.
So I have a quick response, if you don't mind, to what was
Yes, go
just
ahead.
stated. So I have an example of racism and that I experienced as a senior in high school. I was 17 years old. I was 2 weeks away from being 18. And I remember a situation where I was in a classroom and my teacher, I was needing a third math course to be eligible for what you would consider to be NCAA clearinghouse to accept a scholarship. And my teacher, she knew that I struggled with algebra. This was an algebra 2 course, and she knew that I struggled with mathematics. And the teacher said this openly in class. She said that, hey, you might be Mr. Cool, you might be Mr. Big Time Athlete, but you have to pass my class to take that scholarship. And she made an innuendo that she was going to make it very tough for me. And I ended up getting into an argument with that teacher, and she pushed for me to get suspended. And it was a tough experience for me. And during that time, and I'm gonna tell you, during that time, I attended a basketball game during suspension, and the resource officer in the school waited a week later to prosecute me for misdemeanor trespassing. And it's the only charge that I've ever had on my record to this day. And I'm 36 years old. And it was in my city, in my school, and they made sure that that happened. And we know that doesn't happen in certain school systems. It just doesn't happen. They don't. But they wanted to make it stick. And when it comes to people that look like you and I, we just don't have the luxury of making those type of mistakes.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And to piggyback, I used to coach. I mean, I used to tutor football players at UGA. So I know certain professors that, or certain black professor that had a considerable lawsuit against the institution because she just refused. She was a black professor. She just refused to pass athletes just because they were football athletes. And I remember, and I can say this honestly as possible, a lot of them they're in the NFL, and I would tell them, and I know this sounds very harsh, I would tell them, I need you guys to make it a point to try in class, because I was like, you're nothing but a black slave on these people's football field. And I had to break it down to them, because it's just like what we sometimes see in the NFL, like you're just a pawn to these people. And as soon as you make a mistake, as soon as, if you're dating someone white, you can't take that person. I saw you couldn't take that person home. You were just as dead if you were in a small town dating a white girl because you were a football player. Like, I was very tough on the football players or in a basketball player, because they just did not have the mindset that this could happen to me. And sure enough, I saw it. Like, professors that were white would fail them with no regards, and it was just like, you know, I don't know. You just they didn't care. They
They,
couldn't get it. They just
they're
couldn't
not
get it.
vested. They're not vested in the academic matriculation of the athlete. They're only
Oh,
wanting. They're only wanting to take what the athlete will offer the program that they can make
absolutely,
money off of. That's it.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
which is why we also see the continuous conversation amongst the NCAA
Mhm.
to see if we can figure out ways for players to receive compensation beyond their tuition and scholarship. My father was privileged with being a first generation college student who was able to work his way out of poverty because of the basketball scholarship. And he was able to overcome even a physical handicap to do so, which paved the way for me to do that. But what he shares about his experience is that some of the things that other athletes received as bonuses, he did
Bonuses.
not have the opportunity to receive. And he recently shared with me that when he got to college, he was one of the few students who did not have a driver's license, did not know how to drive. And a
Mm.
lot of the students that came from all over the country came from families with means. And so there was this struggle that he had to go through while his family back home even thought he was taking a break by going to college. And so those are some of the stories that I've lived with being a product of a first generation college student. And so it kind of prepared me to have my antennas up, and the things that I may not have been able to see, I had someone to see it for me. But because it was not the norm in my family for education, my eyes still had to be open to some things that no one could have prepared me for.
I concur.
Awesome. So this is a good discussion, because we a lot of times we're talking about, like she said, is there's overt, but there's the subtle things that we have to be aware of as Black people, as a Black culture. So I want to shift to what got us here to this point and got us to the state where we are in. Everybody's familiar and I'm sure has seen the video of George Floyd. So I want you kind of explain how you felt when you saw that. Where were you? How you felt, and what was your feelings at that point?
Whew.
I know,
I
I
never
know.
did
I
a
told you,
video.
Dr. Nick, I don't know. We're gonna
We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk
Woo!
about it. We have to talk about
We
it.
do need to talk about it. So
Yes.
I will share that I
Yeah.
have not seen the video. I've only seen the pictures.
Okay.
I decided not to see, I intentionally decided not to see the video. I've
Mm,
talked to my friends and I had my best friend say, you need to see the video. Now, here is where I approach this. I've come to the realization that what we are not talking about is beyond post traumatic stress disorder.
yes.
There's a concept of post traumatic slave disorder that we are not having the conversation about. And it's challenging because when you live through the reality of people that have come before you, I call myself a old people baby, right? So I have old people that I just love, and I love being around old people. Well, you learn about the stories that they shared, and so for my family, we had a situation where in 1963, an uncle was 14 years old, and he was shot and killed here in Savannah, and there was never any arrest. There was never a trial. And my father and his siblings always talk about hearing the cries of their single mom um, nightly for a long period of time. But what it did for the family, she held her children closer and their friends closer. And so my family has this almost suffocating love for one another because it holds us tight. And my grandmother would always say to me every time I came home from college, she would say, watch the speed limit, be
Mm-hmm.
careful who you're hanging around.
Hmm.
And that was almost her scripture. Be
Mm-hmm.
careful of your speed and watch who you're hanging around. And she's no longer with us, but she couldn't provide a college education experience for me, but she knew that she was sending out her black grandson, the first of her black grandsons, to college.
Yeah.
And that's the wisdom that she left us with. So it was race was very much a part of how you're raised. And so when you see images of another black man on the ground, on the street,
Mm,
the trauma associated with viewing that brings up every other image that has been seen over and over and over again, to the point that it makes me question, why are we continuously exposing ourselves to trauma over and over again and being expected to talk about it with a level of immediacy, because I got calls and text messages. What do you think? Now the clergy side of me is called to be pastorally uh, caring of other people, but what we also realize is that you have to be responsible for your own self care in the
that's right.
midst of that. And so I woke up on Wednesday last week. My sister was relocating to Savannah, and I was there in Philadelphia to assist her. 5 o'clock in the morning, all the notifications are on my phone along with my alarm, and it says I can't breathe.
Mm,
And so 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm looking at my phone. I can't breathe. Is it the anniversary of Eric Garner?
mm,
What do you mean? What's going on? And then you realize we have another person on the ground, and so
mm,
let's put this in some
Mm-hmm.
timing spans here. We're talking about finding out about Ahmaud Arbery. That now the murder took place in February. We're finding out about it, and then we have Breonna Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
and now we have George Floyd in a 3 weeks time span. So, and then people call you and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a whole lot to say right now. Let me process
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
what I've just seen again."
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
so those are my
Yeah.
thoughts. And that's kind of how I approach that. So I have not seen the video, but
Hmm.
been being made aware of it again and seeing the images and then the perspective of what we saw. And then a couple of days later, someone had another vantage point to see that it
Hmm.
wasn't one person on the neck,
It's the,
but then there's other officers on his body.
mhm,
And then to get slapped in the face with an autopsy that said that heart disease caused
Mhm.
his death. Now now this is all happening while we are with coronavirus,
mhm,
COVID-19 pandemic hanging in the backdrop,
Yeah.
showing us how African Americans and Black folks are disproportionately being affected by the virus
mhm.
than any other ethnic group or people at all.
So,
It's showing and highlighting access to healthcare, is
Yeah.
showing and highlighting injustices, is showing and highlighting everything that's already. So we have the makings of pandemonium in a pandemic.
Mm,
Mhm. That's
that's
good.
true. That's good.
I want to piggyback off of that. I want you all to remember this, and I want to preface what I'm going to say is that there's always going to be those wolves in sheep's clothing. And
Mm,
I want you to think about for our people what we've always been faced with. We've been steered to the slaughter by the oppressor. I just want to throw out Tuskegee for you all in terms of the coronavirus and the different things that we've seen out here. We have been I can tell you we've been exposed to these things in our history, and our history repeats and shows us that we've had an enemy that has literally, introduced diseases that have generationally set us back. We know this. And when we talk about, and we know this, and so
Mhm.
when we talk about the foods that we've had access to, why are we only having access to certain foods? They're
yeah.
steering us to the slaughter. We don't
Hmm.
have enough education to even teach us what to look for, barely to read labels, but they're going to tell us what we can consume and what we can't.
Yes.
Here's what I'm going to say about George Floyd. Before we even speak about George Floyd, let's talk about Philando Castile because that happened in the same city. We didn't even get justice for him yet.
Right.
We still need to be hashtagging Philando Castile.
Yep.
See, this happened in Minneapolis. This is not something that just happened with George Floyd. They have countless black men that have been slaughtered in Minneapolis. Which we still need to be hashtagging Alton Sterling. We haven't gotten justice for him. There's so many other individuals that we can talk about. Breonna Taylor, we're still hurting about Breonna Taylor. I'm in
Hmm.
Georgia, so I know about Ahmaud Arbery. And this is not something that's happened by chance. We know this. Every time these things happen, what is the first thing that they do? Who do they turn into the victim? Who do they turn into the person? I mean, we're never the victim. We're never the victim. We can't even protest
Right.
without being criminalized. Charlottesville was able to go out there and create a whole lot of havoc
Yeah.
under the guise of what? We're not even a percentage close to Charlottesville when we protest in Atlanta or in New York or Minneapolis, but they're ready to gas us. I'm just gonna let you know this is we're I mean we need each other right now.
Yeah.
This story has come all too common, all too often.
Hmm.
Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I actually saw the video on accident. I was like, Reverend Cornelius over here. I didn't. I woke up to again social media, your notifications, and I was like, I can't breathe. And I thought the same thing. I was like, did I miss anniversary? Like, what is this? And then started getting texts. Finally went to social media, and I saw a plethora of statuses that was like, I shouldn't have ever watched the video. And so I'm like, what video are they talking about? And finally I had the same thought. I was like, why would you subject yourself to an emotional or sensational moment that is going to kind of just suck you down this tube? Because I had started to see all of these images, and I think sometimes we want to this commonality of pain and suffering to be like, okay, I can stand in the fight with you. I understand, but a picture is worth 1,000 words sometimes. And whether the picture was still or was moving, you know what I'm saying? George Floyd is dead. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see, you know, how much pressure. We're all on here, very intelligent Black individuals. The caption read 8-9 minutes, whatever it was. It wasn't nothing short, you know. So when I finally saw it happen to be on the news, and I was so surprised that the news actually showed, I think it was like, it was either CNN or ABC was one of them, but they showed the exact thing, and I was like thinking like, oh, this is a still picture, and then it started rolling. I was like, oh, like I couldn't do anything because that by that time I was just stunned, and it just kind of I think for, like, you know, everyone said for my Berry, it was just like I was so numb from that. And then Brown Taylor, I was just numb. I hadn't processed anything. I was just like, just okay, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And then I started to repeat what had already happened just not even a full year ago. I think once I went Sunday with some members from my church to do a prayer and peaceful protesting, and I think I lost it then. I got in my car and I just finally cried because I felt like it was something that was just like it's almost like like that dam that breaks, like golly, like this, like all of it had just been inside of me, and I was just like, this is my reality. Like I'm literally finally seeing what my parents and my grandparents had to go through with the
Mm.
civil rights. Like that's what it meant for me. I'm like, I was a small individual when Rodney King was happening. I remember reading about that. I'm like, yo, like this is what this is for me. So it's scary because I feel like this is our modern day civil rights movement. And I don't think our generation of, really, I'm seeing two sides of, oh, we're tired of hearing about standing on the shoulders of, Martin Luther King and this, that, and the third. You seeing the duality of young minds not really getting like they died so that we could really be here. They died. They no longer can tell their story from, like, they can't verbalize their qualitative story. You know what I'm saying? Other than us reading about them because they are now history. They're past tense. You understand what I'm saying? So like I have to, it really just put in context for me, like, yo, like we are real, there's nothing new under the sun. We are really living out a civil rights movement. If we can see KKK rolling around in Stone Mountain and in these back alleys of these towns, or just seeing like white supremacist groups just, tirade the internet like with no problem. And then you have number 45, who I will properly dress as, President Trump, because I do believe in honor. For him to call us thugs, your whole wife is an
I
immigrant.
wanna
Like,
I,
let's start there.
I gotta help you. I wanna talk about something with you real quick. What is the common denominator with all of these murders? Here's
Mm.
what's happening right now. It's happening live and unfolding so that we can see it. They're dramatizing it, and what they're doing right now is they're allowing you to see what they're doing. And that's
Right.
something that you have to pay attention to. And since we know this, what's the answer to that? When we talk about Dr. King and then the next generation not understanding it, this is what's happening right now. Dr. King died, and and the things that he stood for ushered us in to where we are now. But here's what happened. Here's what Dr. King did. What did he do for us? He brought us back to the footsteps of the Most High God. And this is what's happening now. Where do you turn when you can't turn anywhere else? When you see that officer put his
Mhm.
knee on George Floyd's neck, he knew, he knew that the life was out of George Floyd and kept his knee there for 2 more minutes. That was pure evil. Evil is presenting itself, demonic evil is presenting itself in front of us, and we're seeing it in real time. And what's happening is the there's an enemy out there that wants to incite us. When we lose composure and we start to act out and we start to lose composure, the reason that we should follow on the shoulders of Dr. King, and why I'm gonna reiterate that, is because that is what brought us back to the throne. That's what we need to fight this enemy. We can't fight it barbarically with guns. We can't fight it that way. That's not gonna work for us. I know that people are tired. People are tired. I was in a protest where the police they kneeled in solidarity with us. There were officers that kneeled in solidarity with us. Those individuals that were throwing rocks and bottles, they didn't do anything to progress the movement. They didn't do
Right.
anything. And so though what's happening is when the life is getting squeezed out of our people or shot out of our people right in front of us, it's to kill our spirit. That's what's happening right now. Because we are the reflection of God. We're the God conscious people and chosen people. And in this civil war, there's an enemy that wants to, and we cannot be disillusioned right now. There is two sides. There's a right and a left side. And just because, there are groups that are presenting themselves to be for us, there are parties that are presenting themselves to be for our people that are not for us, that are using our struggle and our history, and we are really believing that they're for us. But really what's happening is when things happen, we have to choose a side. There's a side for law and order, and then there's a side that's going to be anti any law and order or justice, and people that just want to overthrow any type. But that's another conversation. That's another conversation.
Yeah.
That's
This is
another conversation.
this is good. So, we know that this is we're seeing history repeat herself, and not even repeat. Can you really say things have changed, right? Where do we go from here? What do we do? What are the answers? Because I invited you because I'm friends with all you all on social media. I know I've seen you guys speak out. I've seen you all at the protest. I see you take a stand. I know Candace is in the front line. She's been working as an essential worker for since the pandemic has started and seeing all the injustices. So where do we go from here?
I think that's a great question. And I think that part of I had a conversation with my supervisor today because the work that I'm doing around addressing issues of poverty um, really help us to understand that poverty is a social injustice, right? Um, People lack access, opportunity, influence, and justice, and social capital. And so, what we are looking at is an attack on social capital. Our social capital is our bodies. And so, the question that we ask ourselves is how do we mobilize our entire being, mind, heart, body, soul? How do we strategically get together and have conversation and a plan? Protesting does have its place, but protesting without a plan
Mhm.
um, becomes just that. It becomes a lot of noise. And I've asked myself the same question, Coach E. Why is it that we are continually bombarded with these images? And it's almost what we read about and learned about in slavery, where there would be violence inflicted upon another slave in order to keep them in line, in check, in order. And so we live in this time where we have access to social media. So not only are you seeing it on television, you have to witness it on all the other social media platforms. You're looking at these same images. And so it's causing some people to retreat. It even causes some people to cope by being quiet or cope by saying, well, we should also be outraged by what we like to call black on black crime, which is just crime of proximity. And
Thank you.
so we are in a place where people use their different hiding places on how they're going to cope. And so we need to move out of our quiet places and have platforms like this, but then be strategic about how do we impact what really America hears. And what we know that America hears is America hears money and America hears violence. And so what we have happening is the protests. There are some people who are paid to cause protests to turn into riots. And these are
Yeah.
people that come and incite violence. They hand out bricks, they hand out lighters, and they hand out lighter fluid, and they break windows. It's called mob mentality that ends up taking over these protests. But
Tifa.
one of the things that we saw happen with the Montgomery bus boycott and what we saw happen with Rosa Parks was it was a strategy. It wasn't just a lady sitting on a bus. It was a lady sitting on the bus who had social capital, and she had the NAACP, and they had a prolific speaker and thinker in order for us to be able to mobilize something. Now, what they did not expect to happen was that the white wives and the white women and the white mothers begin to put those ladies who would come to their homes in cars and move them around. But it crippled the bus industry in Montgomery, Alabama. And so, what we understand is that we have to figure out what our economic plan is going to be.
Absolutely.
What is our strategy going to be? And we keep looking for a leader, not recognizing that we are the leader.
Mm.
And
That's
so our collective voice together, along with our work and responsibility, will help us to mobilize our homes. And so what we see happening too is the crippling of our homes, where we have a high, now this is what's interesting. Across all cultural lines, we see that we have 20 million homes absent a biological father. That's all across the board. And so when we are in a position where we see the absence of leadership, we see that there's another leader that comes in place. Now, this is on a spiritual tip. We have to understand that we have to submit ourselves to a higher power. We have to submit ourselves to God to get the strategy on what to do next. And this is when, and I believe this about the state of the church, is that I believe the church lost its prophetic voice in the midst of our scandal and drama over the last several
Yes.
years, to the
say it.
point now where the churches are closed building wise, but the church has to speak up, which is us, the bodies. Remember, I talked about social capital. The church is us, and we have to be the ecclesia, the called out ones, to
Yes.
then put the strategy into place. Because if God be for us, who can be against us? We recognize that there will be a challenge, and there will be issues, and there will be danger. But we have the strategy, we have the intellect, and we have the spirit on the inside of us. And so, your question on what do we do next? I think we're doing it now. And beyond this, we begin to mobilize other conversations and action.
Awesome. Thank you. I love you said we are the leaders because a
Mhm.
lot of times we are looking for a person to step up. And they had that in the civil rights movement. They had people, certain leaders, but I think we're moving past that in a generation that we are have to look at ourselves as influencers. We have life has changed, platforms have changed, people have social media, people have so many different aspects. So the thought process has to change, is to say that I am a leader, and people have to see themselves as leaders in order to step up as a leader. So who else want to talk to that where do we go and what will be next?
I think you have to attack it from many standpoints because, like you said, we are the leaders. So everyone has their purpose. You
Mm.
need to find your lane. Saying it, I kind of say that often. So yes, this is spiritual warfare, but there are also people who don't believe in that, but they can still be just as useful, just being a face, being a positive force. And like I said, it's not always overt actions. I didn't watch the video because I do believe in the post traumatic slave disorder, post traumatic stress disorder. It is traumatic to
Mhm.
keep watching these images and keep having to show up with a smile on your face. Um,
Talk about
but
that. Talk
for
about that.
me, I feel like I am diligent, even militant, about creating a surrounding in which I don't want anyone to feel comfortable in thinking that they can treat me in any way because of the color of my skin. I don't want you to feel like it's acceptable to be disrespectful, to just to get away with your privilege and your racist actions because these things, especially in the South, is so deeply rooted in people that it's things that most people won't even recognize. And
Mhm.
because as a people, I feel like we don't want to cause trouble, especially in the workplace. We come across as aggressive, which is
Mhm.
fair. But in my workplace, I'm not going to be disrespected. I'm not going to let racism rule my environment. So my thing is in my day-to-day life, I'm going to check you. I do not want you to think it is acceptable to mistreat people based off the color of their skin. And everybody doesn't have that attitude or doesn't have that confidence or whatever courage, whatever you want to call it. But that's my role. And I hope that I can be an example. I'm not disrespectful. I'm not going to get in your face. I'm not going to argue. I'm not a fighter either. But respectfully, I'm going to let you know that it is unacceptable to mistreat people based on the color of their skin. And hopefully, I can be an example to others. Because if we all start doing it, they'll eventually get the message. Like, it's not okay. And I think there's a lot of people out there that need to understand it's not okay, it's not acceptable, and you're not going to get away with it no more. Mm.
You, you know, I think you made some valid points there. I think everyone thus far has made a lot of awesome points in terms of what's going on in our society, and in terms of some of the things that we could do. I really think that as stated before, we have to mobilize ourselves together. I run a platform for youth athletes, and it's a platform where I mentor hundreds and hundreds of track and field athletes and youth track and field athletes. And one thing that I tell them, I said, you're gonna have college recruiters that are gonna recruit you. And one thing that I experienced in terms again of racism, I didn't mention this before, but I actually had a guidance counselor that would not actually give me my recruitment letters. So I was being recruited by several colleges and didn't even know that
Mm.
I was receiving letters of interest, and I was one of the best runners in my state, all American. And so that's something that happens behind the scenes. And one thing that I tell my athletes, I tell them, I say, hey, look, you have a gift, and that institution is going to capitalize off your gift. And I think you mentioned this before about the athletes receiving compensation. I'm totally for that because their bodies are receiving injury, they're putting stress and duress on their body, they're receiving post-traumatic stress disorders and all types of things. But they should receive compensation because these entities are receiving millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars. But in terms of the athletes, they have a gift, and so you have to hold these people accountable. Research these institutions and see what their history is like in terms of race relations. Did they come to your community before they recruited you for your athletic ability to give back to your community? Were they in the community before then? And so I tell them to hold the coaches accountable. See where they are. You know what I mean? So this is a process for the athlete, not just the athlete. I spoke in undergrad with James Meredith, who was the first African American to attend Ole Miss, and John F. Kennedy had to send down the federal troops. A conversation that we had, and he shared with me. He said that our churches and our academic institutions are the first pillars for our children to introduce them into just understanding life. You know what I mean? That's nature versus nurture. And so he and this is the idea that he introduced to me as an undergraduate student. He said that our churches should be accountable for every child that's born within a 10 to 15-mile radius of that church.
Wow.
And so if you understand what we're saying here, are we accountable for our children? It takes a village. Are we raising our children?
Mhm.
Are we teach as a coach, a mentorship? Are we teaching our people how to eat to live? We're dealing with a pandemic, but do we know that if we take care of things uh, from a plant-based level, and I didn't even realize and understand what herbs were and anything about plant-based eating until I was after a college athlete. Imagine what it would have been like to be an All-American and understand how to eat right. You know what I mean? That's just something that I didn't have access to. But teaching our children how to eat correctly, we don't
Take
need
my
our children. How are they? How are they going to go into a school and learn and they're eating Takis for their diet? They're eating Takis
Responsibility.
Taki.
and juice. I mean, they're on the Taki and juice, no juice diet. No,
With
and
high
actually
fructose
no juice
corn
diet,
syrup
straight
and
sugar
red
diet.
dye. Yes, Lord.
Exactly.
So who's
Cancer.
right? So this is what and they have no recess. We cut recess out of our schools, and it's just ironic that any of our black children. I just want to say this: whenever a child starts to have an imagination, he's already has recess taken from him. He can't move. He has to run around the school almost like he's in a jail anyway. You know what I mean? And so he can't do anything. And as soon our children have an imagination, we're labeled as ADHD. We labeled that.
Mhm.
But the same children, our counterparts that don't look like us, they're labeled as what? They're labeled as IB and gifted. And that's
Mhm.
something that we don't realize, and our children are being introduced to what? Medication. This is something that what hinders our children. And so we have to be on the front lines in our school system as administrators. Our guidance counselors shouldn't be so quick to recommend our children for alternative school and medication, because this is what our what? This is what the systems want for our black children. You know what I mean?
We need
So
more people that look like us
right,
in
Mm-hmm.
everything. We need more
right,
people in the hospitals because coronavirus is not discriminating against people.
right.
Okay,
Right.
if you, I am an emergency. I have experience as an emergency room nurse. Let's keep it real. If you have patients in the emergency room, who they gonna call back first? Who they
Mm-hmm.
gonna treat first? Who they gonna give first line medications to first? Coronavirus is not killing us at disproportionate rates. We're just dying at disproportionate rates. And there's various reasons for that. We need more people that look like us in the school. We need more black teachers. Like you said, we need more black guidance counselors. I am so grateful, even though I said that New York City is segregated. I'm grateful. I'm kind of grateful that it was, because I did have amazing teachers and guidance counselors who looked like me, who were able to be honest with me, guide me in the right direction that I probably couldn't have relied on. I just came to Georgia with that knowledge base. So even if I did have the teachers that didn't believe in me, or even if they saw that I was intelligent, they weren't going to help me get to where I needed to go. I know that I had that capability because that's what I saw. So we
Mm-hmm.
definitely do need people in every avenue, engineering, in the
Mm-hmm.
in college, everywhere.
Yeah.
We are gifted. You need to find your purpose and walk in it, because that's the only way we're going to move up. Like we're starting two step back and expected to be two steps forward. How are we ever going to get there? They're not going to help us. We have to help ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just want to, I think, just piggyback off of what you three said. So I know Cornelius mentioned economic capital. And another thing I definitely wanted to add to that was human capital, because we often don't look at our intangible assets or skills that we have as just, self-identifying as Black, African American. When you're here in America, you're Black, okay? Like, I don't care if you have an accent. It doesn't matter what part of Africa you're from. If you're from the Caribbean, when you're in America, United States of America, and they see color, you're Black. So it would, just behoove us to learn like what systemic poverty is, what human capital is, like what are those intangible assets that you have that you could use, and looking at studying laws, like what are policymakers doing now, like what is health policy, what are your social policies. And I think someone said this, like we are protesting, or some of us out there are protesting without a plan, and we don't know the next step. And so Georgia is like one of few states that doesn't have a hate crime law or bill. So like, did we know that I didn't know that until recently. So I saw myself now as, let me stop. We perish for lack of knowledge. It's
Hmm.
great to chant. It's great to get some exercise out there. But if we don't do anything further, with our voices and going, now is like I say, write your congressman. I used to think like, oh, is that really going to work? And I used to say that because I never saw things happen based on my perception of how I saw white America. I'm not going to say what I work for, but anyway, I work for a pretty large company, a well-known company. And one of the things I was definitely kind of uh, I was in disagreement about was, COVID happened, and everyone's working from home, and we got all these memos about let's have mindfulness Monday, let's meditate, kumbaya. And I have yet to see anything come out about the social injustices of what's happening. And now, like, what happened to these mindful Mondays? Can we? I could have sworn we had a culture department at my job.
Oh,
Let's hold them accountable. Should I go to HR? Because, what are these C-suite executives looking like? Can I see what your roster and your board of, like, these are things we need to hold companies accountable for. Everybody's like, yeah, Black Lives Matter. Can I see your C-suite members? Like you said, someone said is some people look like they're for us until we start digging in and kind of just categorizing a lot of these things. One thing I'm very passionate about is is I pretty much grew up vegetarian, but I am vegan, plant-based. And like someone said, like what's going on in our community, we do not teach nutrition at a basic level. Most doctors don't even take nutritional classes, so that's why we see obese doctors, or they just prescribe medication to us first. As far as like, oh, your child has ADHD. No, like sometimes it's just what's in our system, in our neighborhood, in our community of schools. I've been an advocate for older adults gerontology, and so I'm big on older adults. And then when it comes to female reproductive health, um, I'm big on like how do we get? I think someone said this. How do you educate or make it cool to go to med school to be a doctor that in your specialty? Like how do we do that? It's so, like she said, it's so many avenues and lanes that we could work from. But I think we have to really hold people accountable, go to these look at our policy holders and stop looking at Hollywood like they have the answer. It's so cool to be a rapper. It's so cool to be an actress. And I don't take any of those creative parts or geniuses away. But why isn't it cool to be an accountant over how you gonna stack your wealth? A financial advisor, a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer. It's just like we look to all of these other innuendo kind of people that I'm not saying they don't care, but in I think it's Ecclesiastes, it says money answers all things
That's
except
it.
death. Because if you had COVID and you still had money, and if it didn't help you, you died. But if you have the money to get the wealth and the resource, you have a larger chance of percentage of living. And that's something we don't amass in Black community. Financial wealth, health as an economic resource. Your health is an economic resource. I think all things economics. Black people are considered 3/5 of a human in the Constitution, but yet, we cause the most damage in this world. I don't understand what the other 40% of our body is doing if we're only considered 60% of a human.
Right. Exactly.
Awesome. So
Um,
we are coming to our hour. I know that we can go another hour on this. This has been really good. And
Yeah.
oh
this
wow.
is this
Wow.
exactly, the time has just flew by. But this is what we need. This is the type of things that we need to start healing, start looking for solutions. I was just, as you all were talking, because you guys are our millennial generation, our thought providers, our innovators, our creators. And then now you have Generation Z that's coming up, living in a world that is totally different from when I was their age and then from where you were their age. So they're going to be needing new ideas, new innovations, and things to lead them in their life as well. So I just want to get a summary of some of the things that you all talked about and how to move forward. The first thing you said is getting back in order in submission with God. That's number one. Getting God, coming into line with the Heavenly Father, our Creator, understanding, getting the guidance on how to move forward. Then you talked about awareness, knowing who we are, not only in ourselves, but knowing who we are in Christ and being leaders and stepping up and being the leaders that we have been designed to and being created to be. So, and then you all, I think multiple people said this word accountability. And this was powerful. Having the accountability across the board, not only in our own homes, because it starts there, starts in our homes, but then now going to our churches. And what are our churches doing? We, as a church, word says we have been called to be the salt and the light of the world. We're in this world, but not of this world. So we're called to be different. So having the church be accountable, not only our accountability in our churches, but in our schools, in our communities. So having the accountability across the board and truly making light to say it does take a village. It's going to take us corporately coming together and uniting in order to take a stance against of the history, the pain, the stress that has been caused in this community. Also, I think it was Candace that says more representation, both Candace and Denisha, more representation in our institutions, our social institutions, our educational institutions, our healthcare institutions, and education. Education on policies. Like you said, there are things that's going on that we are clueless. A lot of us aren't even registered to vote. Something as simple as going to the ballots and putting your word and letting your voice be heard. We have primary elections that are coming up in Georgia on next week. Other states have started their primary election. This is the time to go and let your voice be heard. I think Denisha said a lot of times we have the mindset of, oh, that's not going to change, or my vote is not going to count. That is not true. If this country works on data, if there's no data, there's nothing to happen. Right? We have a census every 10 years. How many people
Yeah.
have filled out the census? The
Yes.
census is going to dictate where these fundings go. The census are going to dictate where all these monies go. The roads, the schools, having school lunches. But if you're not filling it out,
Yeah.
you know who is. You know who is filling it out. And that's why, thank you.
Count.
That's
Lord.
why
Person in that. Thank you.
we can't complain. We can't murmur. We can't complain
Yeah.
because we haven't done the basic things that we need to do in
Mhm.
order to move forward. So I'm excited, and I just thank you guys.
You done
This is
got
your
turned,
time.
Dr. Nick.
I want to put it down. This was your time because this platform is for our millennials, and you guys. Let me tell you, you guys are amazing. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your
Thank you.
schedule, taking the time out of your night to come on to share a little bit of you with me and with everybody who is watching live. We got a lot of people
Oh,
on all these platforms chiming in, making comments, and those that are going to watch the replay. And this is only the beginning. So if I come in your inbox again to say we're gonna do it again and we're gonna have another conversation, I hope that you'll be with me because this is the way we come together. As a culture, as a people, as a family, in order to truly live the life, the abundant life that God has created and called us to live. So I thoroughly thank you all, and I have a special request. I know she's gonna kill me, but in my spirit, I know that she is ready.
oh God.
No, 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 no,
Okay,
no. I'm not gonna do
good.
it. So I am going to request that
Okay, this.
my my sister Candace take us out.
Oh, glory. Yes.
Oh, take us
Yes.
out this evening. She is an amazing, amazing spoken word artist, just really using her words as power. He said life and death is in the power of the tongue, and she has a gift. So I would, Candace, I know it's her
And
bedtime. She's like, she
it's
got to go to work,
all the
but
time.
it's okay.
I
So
have
I'm going to ask Candace to take us out on one of her pieces. And again, I thank you all for participating. And this will be the first of many. So thank you.
Thank you.
all
Thank
right.
you.
What do I want to do? I'm gonna do this piece. It's called "Can I Live," and I'm gonna
Fabulous.
and it's not at the top of my head, but I'm gonna share it with you all. Can I live? You reach to touch my hair, the crown upon my head, the literal representation of my roots hanging down with pride. Can I live? You admire our bodies from a distance, pimp them out for your entertainment. Asses on screens, chiseled bodies on the courts and the 50-yard lines. Do you know the cost? You spend thousands of dollars to replicate, dissect us with every step we take in this cold world that doesn't want us. Yet you desire us, desperately want to be us. Our ample bosom, our rounded backside that was so graciously passed down by our ancestors. Genetics are free, yes, but do you know the cost?
Hmm.
You love the culture without the color. All you hear is a cool new beat. All you see is something nice to wear. You leech off our cool indifference, our swagger, our creativity and ingenuity, our strength and tenacity, our resilience to overcome. But do you know the cost? The whips and the lashes, the sweat and the tears, the blood and the bruises. Do you know the cost? Bodies in oceans, bodies twirling in the hot southern sun, black bodies hanging from trees, swaying in the breeze like the ripest of fruit. Hoses at full blast, tear gas and dogs, smoke and fire, beatings and bullets. Can I live? You know the
Mm.
rhythm in our reggae, the pain in our soul, the
Mm.
story in our jazz, the weeping in our blues. Our tears have value. But as you very well know, everything in this capitalist society is for sale. Do you know the cost? Fathers in jail, mothers overdosed, babies orphaned to the streets. Do you know the cost? Sisters on the corner, brothers in jail, bodies struck down, blood on the concrete. Do you know the cost? Can I live with this black skin, broad nose, full lips, Nazi dreads, head up, crown high? I refuse to be involved in this cultural genocide. I simply won't comply. You cannot have the culture without the color. You need to know the
Mhm.
cost, comprehend the price that has been paid, all that has been taken from us, all that we have lost. You need to know the cost so that I can live. So,
Mm.
can I live?
What did I say?
Hey,
Yes.
Thank,
dope,
What's
man.
your
thank.
last name so we can follow you
Dope,
on
man.
social
Yes,
media?
My
please,
name is
please
John. I am at
follow.
I.m.csane on Facebook and Instagram. I.m.csane on Facebook
Make
and
sure you put all of your information on in the
Nice.
chat so people can follow and
Yeah.
grab your book.
Instagram.
Again, thank you all. I do appreciate you so much. You guys don't know. And we'll do this again. You guys have a good night, everyone. Thank you guys for
Thank
watching.
you
We'll be
guys.
Thank
again
you.
on next Wednesday at 8:30 right here on Facebook Live.